Welcome to an edition of Boxing Info. I'm your host, The Islander, and I sincerely apologize for not getting out a preview video last week of the fights that happened over the weekend. It slipped my mind that Mikey Garcia was fighting for the WBC lightweight title, and I basically had kind of done a small preview as I talked about the Leo Santa Cruz Cruz Frampton fight in previous videos. But I wanted to do more of and probably a good thing I didn't, because I had that one totally wrong. Totally undersold Leo Santa Cruz and his ability to, change his style and be able to make changes, going into a rematch. And we could start with that fight because that's the one I watched on Showtime, in in which basically I'm blanking out right now, in which it was the big rematch between them. And it looks like, to me, they're gonna probably fight a third fight. Let's be honest. I hope it is over in the UK. Just because Frampton's been the bigger guy to come over both first to the East Coast and then go out west. But more importantly, obviously Santa Cruz, who looks like he's in the mold, as I said in the last video, from Margarito and from Humberto Soto. As each of those guys has progressed, each one of them has a little bit more ability to box and fight off the back foot. Margarito didn't. Humberto Soto had a little bit of ability to fight standing straight up and behind his long arms. And Leo Santa Cruz has a better ability of doing that, which I only saw in his fight with Abner Mares and didn't think there was any reason. I had this thinking when I predicted this fight that Cruz Frampton controlled what I call the middle ground better. He was faster to the punch, and and that's why I thought he would win the rematch, because a leopard can't change their spots, and no pun intended, because I know he's nicknamed the Jackal. But I thought for Santa Cruz to be effective, he'd have to eventually get close to land his clubbing shots on Frampton. I didn't think he would be able to stay behind a jab and a straight right hand all night long, although he did dig, several left hooks to the body. Frampton looked like he didn't change a thing in his game. He was expecting Santa Cruz to come plodding in and catch him in what I call the foreground, and Santa Cruz never took the bait. Now, as I keep going round and round with Dirk Diggler 3 about my ability to score fights after watching this sport for 36 years now. Yes, this is going to be the 36th year in a row I've been watching this sport fairly closely and studying it. That I was almost astounded when I heard the scoring was a majority decision, because I didn't think this fight was close at all. Yes, Frampton won some close rounds, but again, having the ability to watch this on a high definition TV, which the judges should be forced to do. Forget about punch stats, because I know that kind of irks some people. It was visible who was scoring the cleaner punches. Look at what the two of them looked like before the fight. Look at what the two of them looked like after the fight, and you could see who was catching the punches with their face. Right? Does that tell everything? No. But look, Steve Farhood, who scored the fight 8 rounds to 4 for Showtime, I think probably had it correct. It wasn't any closer than that. I mean, I could have even squeezed it 9 rounds to 3. I cannot think of. I would give Frampton the 12th round just barely. There was a couple of rounds in the middle I would give him barely, and then that was it. I mean, I really cannot come up with more than 3 or 4 rounds to give him in this fight. I don't think it was as close as these judges. And I don't know whether they're told before the fight, man, make it a good fight, make it a close fight, no matter what. Because it's almost every fight now. I take issue with the scoring. Look, I think Santa Cruz proved me wrong. Frampton also helped prove me wrong, and I think that they're going to fight a third fight, and it'll probably be the best fight of the trilogy, because both of them will be making changes on the fly, and Frampton's probably going to force Santa Cruz to fight at close range. What happens in that instance, I don't know, because I think that probably the sharper puncher is Frampton, but the guy who does more damage with his shots is Santa Cruz, accumulative damage, and I wonder if this was a 15-round fight, what would have happened going forward because it looked like as each round progressed, Santa Cruz got a little more braver and braver with the type of output and he also got caught with a lot of good shots when he did apply more pressure to Frampton. So I mean, I would have predicted Frampton was going to win the fight before the fight, thinking that you can't make a leopard change their spots. But in any event, I think that a good win for Santa Cruz, and I look forward to a third fight between them. I don't think the two of them have done severe damage to each other like a it was Israel Vargas and Israel Vasquez and Rafael Marquez or Barrera and Morales were doing to each other. This has been highly technical, and then that brings us to the HBO card, which I had to watch in basically on DVR. Takashi Miura, formerly the WBC super featherweight champion, taking on Miguel Mikey Roman. Look, the thing is that Miura, if he was a little bit lighter, meaning like if he was 122 or 118, I think he would probably be a very long running champion that we never get to see fight over in Asia. He'd be racking up title defenses in Japan. But because he's past what I call the Mendoza line, which is about the 126, 130 pound area, that's where fighters can't hide in a certain corner of the world anymore. Like they used to. I know some fighters hide in Germany and fight that's one of the things Joe Calzaghe was accused of being, basically a protected fighter. But once you get above 130, if 130 or above, you can't hold a title hostage by staying in Thailand or staying in Japan or wherever. And I will give credit to Miura. He's come to the United States freely, especially when he lost his title to Francisco Vargas in an upset. And I'll talk about him in a little bit. But Miura again was in a very high contact fight with Roman. He had some challenging moments early on. Roman looked good, and then Miura came back and started taking the fight over. One big left hand to the body. I think it was in the 9th round. Put Roman down. Didn't think he was getting up. A flurry of punches put him down again in the 10th round. I thought that he had taken probably Miura's best shots until finally he got cracked with a left hand in the 11th round. I'm surprised the referee let him hold out his right jab like he did, kind of measure Roman and crushed him with a left hand and went down for the count. I think we're probably going to see a fight between Miura and the new WBC champion, Miguel Berchelt, which is going to be a great fight, in my opinion, because he fights long. Miura sometimes gives up his height, but is not afraid of high contact. And that brought us to the main event on HBO, which was their favorite darling, Francisco Vargas, who they like to deem the modern-day Arturo Gatti, against untested Miguel Berchelt, who has not been past 6 rounds until this fight. And it appeared early on that one of two things was going to happen. He was either going to whack out Vargas, because he hurt him early, or he was going to basically blow his wad and just fall apart. Well, neither one of those two things happened, and a lot of it's a credit to Vargas and his toughness, although it's probably going to be his downfall now, because it looks to me like every one of these fights, whether it's against Miura, whether it's against Salido, and now it's against Berchelt, he basically has racked up way too many miles, and miles meaning punches taken, on his drivetrain, and he's not going to be the same. I didn't think that Berchelt could keep up what he was doing in the first 5 or 6 rounds, and Vargas showed signs of taking over the fight in different rounds of the fight, where he would basically rack off combinations and put Berchelt on his back foot. I will say this: Berchelt kept his cool about him and kept his game plan. He kept at his game plan, and little by little, Banidito's face just started falling apart. One cut was ruled by a butt. 2 others were by punches. Obviously, I mean, he had, I thought, Vargas on the verge of being knocked out several times in the fight. He was one punch away from doing that, and for some reason, I think it's just his championship heart and his just will to win. Vargas was able to stay upright until the very end in the 11th round when he was staggered along the ropes and Berchelt was still teeing off on him. And I don't know where this guy gets the stamina from, unless he just. And I will say this about Berchelt: he doesn't look like he gets very excited. He fights kind of like Miguel Cotto in the sense that he's just working at his pace, doing damage at his pace, not at the super hyped pace that Vargas and Salido are going to fight. My prediction is Berchelt's going to either fight a fight with Salido or Miura, and it's going to be fantastic. Now, let's play devil's advocate here. What would have happened if Mr. Vasil Lomachenko would have gotten a hold of Francisco Vargas? What's going to happen if Lomachenko decides to unify belts and gets a hold of Berchelt? Because I wonder what would happen if Nicholas Walters would have gotten a shot at Francisco Vargas and would have been teeing off on him. It's neither here nor there. It's all water under the bridge now. I won't write off Vargas because I think he's going to be back again. Hopefully when he gets his scar tissue healed. And, that division is basically heating up with a lot of action-type fighters in it and spilling over to, I forgot to cover the other fight on Showtime. I'll get back to it. So I look forward to different fights between 130 and 140. A lot of good fights. Speaking of which, I forgot the undercard fight for Frampton and Leo Santa Cruz, and that was Mikey Garcia stepping up in weight, or he was already at 135, fighting against WBC lightweight champion Dejan, I can't pronounce his last name, Zlaticanin or whatever the heck it is, from Montenegro. And I didn't know what to expect because I've never seen Zlaticanin fight before. But what I was thinking was, he's the only fighter from Montenegro. Congratulations to him to win a world title, a real world title. And I was thinking back to a fighter he reminded me in the way he tried to fight of a guy named Leonard Dorin from Romania who used to fight out of Canada. And Leonard Dorin was a very squat, tough fighter. Ask Paul Spadafora. But he was put away by one body shot by Arturo Gatti at 140 pounds and never fought again. And Zlaticanin reminds me a lot of him, both in the way he fights and the way he looked. And Mikey Garcia basically dominated 3 rounds. It didn't take much analysis on this. He was sticking Zlaticanin with a jab. Zlaticanin decided he wasn't going to try to jab his way in. He was just going to try to bull his way in. And Garcia missed a few times in the first 2 rounds with a right uppercut, which is what he was trying to bait him with. And finally scored one in the 3rd round, and then kind of tried a left hook that went behind Zlaticanin's head or off the side of his head. And Zlaticanin went to try to grab Garcia, but instead was basically leaning face forward into the ropes. And when he turned to his right, a right hand from Garcia's hip was brought up into his chin. It was a straight punch, not an uppercut. At such a force, it basically had Zlaticanin, if you look at the replays of this, because it's going to be one of the knockouts of the year, if not the knockout of the year, if it holds up. But if you look at he was wincing after he took the uppercut. His face was like scrunched up and wincing. When he got hit with that right hand, his face just went blank because it was like Control-Alt-Delete on his brain, and he went down in one piece hard. A sensational knockout. Now, here's what I ask all you out there. Who wins a fight at a catch weight, somewhere between 130 and 135, between Mikey Garcia and Vasil Lomachenko? Something tells me that Lomachenko's got a few wrinkles in his game that are going to basically touch Garcia where he hadn't been touched before. But to have power like that, and the ability to throw many different punches is something that I thought Nicholas Walters was going to test Lomachenko. I'm wondering, Mikey Garcia, who I think is also looking to go northward. I'm probably looking for a fight with Terence Crawford. I don't see anything on the horizon for this week in boxing. As far as the schedule is concerned, I think the week of the 18th is when Adrian Broner fights. I think HBO's got a couple coming up, so I'm going to try to separate these shows as preview and recap shows. And somebody was asking me about dream fights again, and they were asking about, I think it was Transistor Man, was asking about Joe Calzaghe versus Nigel Benn. Too many wrinkles in Joe Calzaghe's game. He would have beaten Nigel Benn. Very similar to the way he beat Jeff Lacey and dominate, in my opinion. I'm trying to think. Let me see if I can find it really quick on the computer that I'm recording this on, because I had it up on one of these fights. Okay, Joe Calzaghe versus Carl Frosch, tougher one. I think that Calzaghe just barely edges him out, in my opinion. Whitaker versus Pacquiao, very interesting fight. Normally I would say Whitaker, but there's one caveat in this, and that is Pacquiao was devastating against fellow southpaws. Could Whitaker go a whole 12 rounds without being touched by Pacquiao's left hand? And if he did, could he take it? Because I don't think Whitaker was ever in a position where he would get cracked with a left hand like Pacquiao did to Ricky Hatton, or the way Pacquiao did to who's the Diaz, the one of the four family of flying Diazes that he beat for the version of the 135-pound title. He knocked him out with a straight left hand. It was a perfect example of a lefty versus lefty. I don't think Whitaker would ever be in position to be hit with that type of shot, but Pacquiao would be able to get the left hand in on him, and I think that's a toss-up. I sort of, on one day I'll lean towards Whitaker, on another day I'll lean towards Pacquiao. I think Whitaker would have probably found a way to just keep moving against Pacquiao, away from him, and probably catch him coming in and win a tight decision. What else was, a couple of other people had some other fights. Triple G versus Sugar Ray Leonard. I think it's too early to tell, because I think Sugar Ray Leonard's too close in recent memory. And at 160 pounds, I think I'd give a tiny edge to Leonard, but I don't know. Look, Marvin Hagler was old when he fought Leonard, and Tommy Hearns was even old when they fought a rematch. I think the better fight to look at would be, it's hard to say, because I think Leonard would have beaten Terry Norris if he was in his prime. So that's a nip. I give Leonard a slight edge and probably win a decision over Triple G, or possibly cut him up. You never would know what would happen if Leonard caught him with a combination. We know what happened. Leonard could take punches, but there's no way that Triple G would be walking down Leonard and just dominating him. In my opinion, I give the edge to Leonard in that fight. Triple G versus Hagler, I've already answered this one. I think that Hagler would have beaten Triple G over 15 rounds. Probably have stopped him, just because there'd be no advantage. As technically sound as Triple G is, Hagler would be touching him at all times. Whether they were on the outside, he couldn't get away from Hagler on the outside. On the inside, Hagler was devastating. I think Triple G would get his pound of flesh, but at the same time, Hagler would be touching him just all over the place, head and body. And I think Hagler would have stopped him. A couple of other, that was from Transistor Man 1, from somebody named 162773. The camera makes you look as though you're swelling from an infected tooth. Anyway, it's a fantasy fight matchup. Orlando Canizales versus Miguel Happy Laura. All right, Gabby Canizales knocked out Miguel Laura when they were both at the same twilight stage of their career. And I'm going to tell you this, Orlando Canizales was far better than Gabby. Orlando Canizales all the way. I wish they would have made that fight when they were both fighting concurrently. Barry McGuigan versus Jeff Fennick at 126. That was a tough fight. I think I would probably give the edge to Fennick, just because he was so naturally bigger and stronger that he would probably end up. Then again, I don't know what would happen if McGuigan landed a left hook on Fennick's chin like Zuma Nelson did. Toss-off, I'll tell you what, my gut tells me Fennick. My heart and mind would have wanted McGuigan to win the fight. I was a big fan of Barry. But my gut tells me I know what my eyes saw is what I'm telling you. I know what my eyes see, and I think that Fennec would have probably beaten McGuigan over 12 rounds, because McGuigan had fought 15 into the 14th round a couple of times, and Fennec had never seen a 13th round. No, I take that back. Yes, he had it. Bantamweight, he did. He had fought 15 rounds at bantamweight, 14 rounds at bantamweight. Over either distance, I think that Fennec would have had just a size advantage, in my opinion. Jose Luis Ramirez versus Jose Luis Castillo at 135 pounds. Edge in that fight to Castillo. I think he had more wrinkles in his game. Ask who's the Hispanic causing panic. Juan. I can't remember his name. Somebody said I had a memory like Rain Man. I don't know if that's good or bad because it's not working right now. But when basically that fight would look a lot like when Castillo won back his title after Mayweather stole it from him. What the heck was that guy's name? Because Mayweather wouldn't fight that guy. Lizcano. Juan Hispanic causing panic Lizcano. A fight with Ramirez would look a lot like Castillo showed far more wrinkle in his game in that fight, and that's what I think that would have been. That's going to do it for this week's edition. Dirk Diggler, take my scoring with a grain of salt. Like I said, I can separate myself from the guy I want to win and the guy I don't want to win. I caught some flack about my opinion about the Badu Jack and James DeGale fight. The guy coming forward making the fight scores well with me. The guy who lands more punches that aren't jabs scores well with me. The guy who does more damage to the other guy scores well with me. Badu Jack, even though I didn't want him to win, I thought he was overrated, fit those three criteria, all of them, in the fight with DeGale, who I wanted to win. That's going to do it for this episode. Thanks, everybody.